Hello everyone. This lecture is going to be about classroom management and how we can view it a little bit differently. And I took this article that I felt was a really good article, and it talks about classroom management from the perspective of veteran teachers. So it's called The Changes in Experienced Teachers' Understanding Towards Classroom Management. So it's a research-based article which has a really good review of lit, and it starts out with this section right here that says, teaching is a profession which has unity with experience based on practice and living besides theoretical knowledge, and whose artistic, social, and leadership dimensions are dominant. So it defines teaching in this section right here. As it continues on, it says, therefore, those who perform the profession lead to the individuals in all areas of education in proportion to abundance of experience alongside knowledge. And this is the key point right here. A teacher's point of view on classroom management is of vital importance for the success of teaching. That one sentence kind of will direct us where we're going with this lecture, and it's the idea of point of view. So I'm going to show some videos throughout this lecture that's going to present the point of view of teachers. Now, whether it's a teacher who's burned out and is ready to quit, veteran teachers who've had 25 to 30 years, teachers in the Mississippi Delta, teachers who are discussing supply issues, we're wanting to view classroom management and just classroom structure as a whole through the viewpoint of a beginning or veteran or any teacher. So the key word we're going to look at throughout this entire lecture will be point of view. This research is known as qualitative. When you interview people from any aspect and you do interviews with them, it's qualitative. So I like qualitative. Quantitative, it deals with numbers, and qualitative usually deals with interviews. So just to give you an example of what we're going to go is, let's look at this first video where they're interviewing a brand new teacher about supplies. And let's get that teacher's perspective on supplies.
I knew I was going to be spending money on classroom resources. I don't think I knew how expensive they were, especially the ones involving technology and reading. I had no idea, especially when you're buying them just for yourself and not for an entire building or entire district. It really is pricey, and so I don't think I realized how much those would cost on my own. I definitely have to supply more than I expected I would. I think a lot of people think teachers are given buckets of supplies in the beginning of the year, and we're not. I think my friends and family really expected that, because I don't really have any family members that are teachers, so they didn't know that I would really need to buy so many things for my classroom. So when I was starting to get ready for the year, they were saying, oh, why are you buying glue? Why are you buying scissors? Don't they give that to you? And so they were really surprised. I said, nope, I have to supply a lot of those things for my kiddos, and even if we do ask them to bring things, not everybody is able to. I think supplies matter because not all students are able to supply their own things, and it's not fair to have one student that is able to bring in something and then another student that isn't able to have those same opportunities. So I think it's up to the teacher to make sure that their classroom is a place where all students can have the supplies they need so they all have equal learning opportunities. And so I would hate for one of my students to not be able to do a project or to complete something just because they weren't able to have the supplies come in from home. I remember when I first was looking on adoptaclassroom.org and I was looking at reading materials and I found RazKids. I remember showing them kind of an introduction video up on our iBoard and showing them how it worked and all of the books they could read, and they can earn stars and build their own little robots and things like that, and they were just in awe and they were so excited. And I actually sent home a letter saying, hey, you can go on this at home too, especially because my students that don't necessarily have access to that many books at home, I wanted them, if they had access to technology, to get to go on at home. And I get a weekly report as a teacher of what they're reading, what level they're reading at, if they're taking quizzes, things like that. And so even just that first week of getting that report and seeing how many of my students went on at home, and how many books, especially my kiddos that don't like reading, and they make that very obvious, and they say, I don't like reading, I'm not good at it, and then seeing them go on at home with this adoptaclassroom.org resource and having them come in and saying, wow, I read 10 books this weekend, when I know without that resource they wouldn't have read it all over the weekend. So that was really cool for me to see as a teacher. I think more resources mean more learning opportunities for my students. It means more access to, especially with our RAS kids on the computer and iPad, I think it means more access to 21st century skills and to really getting those experiences with technology at a young age, which I know is going to be important later on. And it's just more opportunities for them to grow and learn and have more access to education.
That video gives us a perspective of a first-year teacher dealing with just the basic logistical issue of classroom supplies. This next video I'm going to show you is kind of a veteran teacher point of view through multiple interviews on how a teacher can be effective.
I think I would tell a new teacher to remain consistent, persistent, and optimistic.
Love them all. Love them all and give them the love and attention that they need, even if they seem that they're the most difficult child in the world, because they're the ones that need the most love, and you would be amazed at what you get from them if you do show them the love.
And to try to set the tone of the classroom from the beginning by establishing very clear expectations, rules, and routines. And I think if you do that, everything else eventually falls into place.
You have to be passionate to do this job. There's no way at home to prepare a lesson that's going to play how you think it will. You can't memorize a script and recite the lines and think that that's teaching. That's what a book can do. The fun part is sort of coming in 60% prepared and letting the students take the rest of it. That excitement comes from students. It comes from that wow moment when you teach them something new. To be a part of that, to scaffold that learning, that excited moment, that's where the excitement comes from.
You can't ever let them see you falter. I pride myself on being that teacher that's personable, but they know to be respectful and not to cross the line. And that's why a quick pickup and always thinking on your feet is so important, because you have to, when they're, having that kid moment, getting them back into what you need them to do and refocusing them.
And I know it's hard sometimes. Some of them are easy to love and some of them are not so easy to love, but they all deserve it. And that's what I would tell a first-year teacher.
This paragraph right here talks about classroom management is organizing and conducting necessary academic and administrative activities to create and sustain a positive learning environment, and it is arranged by teachers. That sentence right there, which is supported by 4 sources, is important because that will give you the best definition I have found for classroom management. So if anyone ever asks you what classroom management is, you can always refer to that sentence. As we continue on, we see that classroom management consists of different dimensions. It's a big part right here that says that classroom management is bigger than just managing a classroom. One thing is teaching strategies, methods, techniques, lecture, harmony with the social environment, cooperation between school and family, and physical conditions of the classroom. Combine that with student characteristics and requirements, the structure of the school, the rules adopted by the school, and the atmosphere formed in the class. So therefore, classroom management is a combination of all of these aspects. And that's why new teachers usually have trouble with classroom management, because they feel it's just about managing your classroom in the harshest or the lightest sense of term. However, it's a combination of all of these dimensions. So for just give an example, if your principal has school rules where he wants the school to go in a certain path, he wants the school to say yes, no sir, and yes sir, and he wants the students to be very respectful, well, that's one governing dimension of all of your aspects of classroom management. If you're teaching in an area that has a high poverty rate, that the students are hungry when they come to school, well, there's another dimension. If you're teaching students who are physically and emotionally harmed at school, well, there's another dimension. So you have multiple dimensions when it comes to classroom management. This is never more present than areas of poverty. And one of the most poverty-stricken areas in Mississippi is known as the Mississippi Delta. This next video I have for you talks about the Mississippi Delta, and it relates it with Teach for America and the Mississippi Teacher Corps, and which is where teachers come from outside our state to help teach. But this video is really good because it shows you the different dynamics of the socioeconomic status of students who are in the Mississippi Delta. So let's look at that video now.
The Delta is probably the most fascinating place in Mississippi. It's largely still heavily agricultural. It was a region of extreme wealth and extreme poverty. Right now, it's certainly more poverty than wealth because of the collapse of King Cotton and the fact that so many people have left the region, both black and white, left the Delta. It's not nearly as vibrant a place as it was, say, 40 or 50 years ago.
When people come in from other states, they might say, oh, this is a rundown place, but instead of saying that, we just need the help here to try to help our children come up to make this a better place.
There are major crises in the Mississippi Delta when you're talking about things like teen birth rate, when you're talking about per capita income, when you talk about children living in poverty, when you talk about obesity. So there's several different things that that you'll notice when you come to the Delta. It's also, even though it's a place of great need, it's also a place of great opportunity.
The surface level of sort of poverty and racism that does linger, that haunts the Delta, is the surface. And what's underneath that are folks who are brilliant and dedicated and wonderful and who need to be invested in and supported and who need to be treasured and learned from.
Education is the most important factor in turning around not just the Mississippi Delta, but the entire state of Mississippi in general, because everything is related to education. If you want to improve your economy, if you want to improve your quality of life, if you want to improve our health outcomes, it all comes back to having educated citizens.
You still have these homes in the South where you can go back generations and not find a high school graduate, a very few. And you can find some homes, I know, where you haven't had yet a college graduate.
You got to be prepared to go to college. You got to have that mindset. Your parents got to be teaching you from a baby. I want you to go to college. But I can't teach my child to go to college if I never been to college. If I never saw what college life is all about, I can't tell my child to go to college. First thing he said, Mama, you didn't go. Why should I go? So
a lot of the problems is the children, they don't have a lot to do here, and they don't have a lot of role models, and it's not really much of a place that you would want to say that, hey, I want to stay here, I want to be here. So the children are very disencouraged about life. A lot of children probably don't believe here that they can make it no further than high school and stop. But a lot of Teach for America teachers come and they encourage the kids that they can go to college, they can be whatever they want to be when they grow up, and the kids really love them, and I love them.
Teach for America is by far one of the best programs that I've encountered in my time in education. This year we actually had the opportunity to hire a Harvard graduate through Teach for America. And I think for me, as well as them, it was an eye-opener because it was almost like a mythical figure. They're there, you hear about them, but you never see them. And just that exposure opens up so many doors and so many dreams. It has been an absolute treat having these teachers in our school.
What I think you're seeing now is a lot of young, energetic, very intelligent people that are actually moving to the region. And they're sharing their talents in the classroom, and more of them are sharing their talents outside of the classroom too. I think just bringing in those new ideas, bringing in those new perspectives is very important to moving the Delta forward.
it's going to be a challenge for them as well as the students, because they might be all excited about coming here, but they got to learn. In order to teach a student, You have to kind of know their background. You got to find out what they're doing, where they live. You got to get out there and you got to know these people.
In Mississippi especially, it is about relationships. You've heard of the Kevin Bacon 7 degrees of separation, but in Mississippi it's 3. It only takes 3 to get you to anywhere. But you can't get there if you don't actually call this place your home and start to get to know people.
If your mission, if your goal is to have an effect on community, if you're trying to change community through your job and through your mission, you've got to get to know the community. And the only way to do that is to take the risk and stick your hand out and say hello. Use that opportunity. Use that opportunity to get to know who we are, what sort of people we are, what we love, what we enjoy, and share that with the children that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. You will make an amazing difference in their lives.
When you make a connection with one person in the community, it's sort of like a chain reaction. It kind of opens you up to family, friends, even leaders in our community.
I think people need to come in not thinking of themselves as superheroes, but coming in thinking of themselves as teammates, saying that I want to be a part of the work that's currently going on. I want to be of assistance. I want to be a helper. I want to lead when it's time to lead. I want to follow when it's time to follow. And I think that's how you get not only yourself invested in the community, but you also get the community invested in the good work that court members do.
You know, I remember the civil rights days. At our house, we had an open house. You were welcome. We had, when the civil rights leaders used to come around, you know, they was placed in different areas, they got to know us. That's how, you know, they dealt with us. They dealt with the problem, and they became like family. And I guarantee you, the teachers would become like family if they got to know these people. They would get more respect. They, you know, and the children would want to learn.
What we have to understand is nobody's going to save the Delta but the folks in the Delta themselves, and they are perfectly capable of doing that. They just need people to believe in them.
We need just help, just to get our children on the right track, to let them know what the real world is about. If we can get them on the right path, then the future will be better.
So once we get past the outside dimension of the influence such as Mississippi Delta, such as poverty and items such as that, we see this sentence right here that says, the effectiveness of classroom management is defined as a learning environment which improves learning, motivation, and joint function. So that would be an effective classroom management strategy or assessment system, which means that the students have improved their learning and they are in an environment that's going to help them become better educated. An effective teacher is the teacher who can include all of the students. And that's one thing that we always forget about as well. Are you reaching all of your students? This next little video talks about effective teaching and some strategies and some characteristics. It's more geared toward the elementary, but it shows you more involvement of all the students, kinesthetic, tactile, and it shows how everyone's kind of happy when they learn, and it gets in more of that aspect right there. So let's watch that video.
Economic research makes it hard to deny that investment in early childhood development is the smartest strategy that we can make. There's really no more fertile period of time for investing in human capacity.
We're having a national debate right now about effective teaching. We're focusing in ways that we never have before on the importance of the teacher that is in the classroom with the children. What we're learning is that there are elements of what teachers know that are important, but it's far more important what teachers do with children in those classrooms.
That is delicious. Okay, I want that. Okay. All right. Make that now, don't forget.
Dozens of studies now from all across the country converge really on the finding that it is the qualities and nature of interactions between the adults and children that are responsible for the learning and development of those kids. There are a lot of ways to define quality. Our way of measuring quality involves observing the interactions that occur between teachers and kids in those settings. We use the classroom assessment scoring system to do that. We've been able to show in almost thousands of classrooms across the country that indeed when one uses a standardized, reliable way of looking at interactions that what we're looking at is predicting children's learning and development. When we look at the interactions that adults have with kids, we generally think of them in terms of how emotionally supportive is the adult toward the children, how much does the adult organize the child's activity and attention and time in the classroom, and what is the adult doing to foster cognitive development and stimulate language and conversation with the children. On the emotional side of things, we're looking for how warm those interactions are. Does the teacher genuinely enjoy the child, and is there some reciprocity in that enjoyment?
Oh, Fidelis said we have to cheer for him, so we gotta say, go Fidelis, go Fidelis, go Fidelis, you can do it, go Fidelis, oh, you did it.
A child should feel that they are supported in their growth of self-esteem, in their use of curiosity and persistence and resilience, all the types of lifelong management skills that we want every individual to have find their seeds in these very young years.
Can you help me make it like this, Master? Okay, first go a line here and then point here and then make the ears. Help me, I can't. Here, that's how you do it. That's too funny. Sorry.
We also pay a lot of attention to how teachers manage time and manage behavior and activities. So we like to see teachers structure learning environments in ways, or learning activities in ways that allows kids to move and allows kids to make noise and allows them to really kind of express themselves individually. I think one of the more important elements that we see of interaction are the ways in which adults provide ways that stretch the children's thinking.
Number 10.
Is 10 on the top, or should 10 be on the bottom?
Bottom.
Okay, and then what comes before 10?
7.
What's this one?
9.
So 10.
A child might be fiddling with a puzzle or trying to learn a new word, and the teacher wouldn't give them the answer, but would just come in and try to offer some hints that would help the child perform the task at a little bit higher level, hopefully have an experience of success, and then celebrate that success together.
Would you be able to show 0?
No 0.
You don't have to show 0. Why? 0 is how many? How many is 0? Nothing. Excellent. Good job, Jack. You know your numbers really, really well.
The ability to actually measure, assess, and then support effective interactions in a classroom has given us a great opportunity.
We're opening up a field of understanding, measuring, and improving the quality and effectiveness of teachers' interactions with kids that I think has enormous promise. I think it actually has the potential to move education forward.
So that video gives us an aspect of effective teaching. Now we look at a new term that pops up in this paragraph right here, and it says that a good teacher will take into effect the considerations of interest and needs of students. And this is where we get this term right here, which is constructivist approach. And constructivist approach is a new era of research, and that's a major terminology. I'm going to show you this video now. It's about 15 minutes long, and it's actually a video lecture from another professor that I've gotten permission to use. And it's from YouTube, obviously, but it's quite a pretty good one. And if you watch the whole part of it, and you can kind of fast forward however you want to, but it's going to give you a basic idea of what constructive lessons and constructive lecture is about. So if you wish, you can slide through and skip this, whatever you want to with this. But if you already know what constructivist teaching is, then you can kind of skip this section. But if you don't, then this is a pretty good informative section on that. So let's go ahead and watch that video at this time.
Today we're going to be talking about the constructivist learning theory. The constructivist learning theory was the learning theory that I'm most related to out of their learning theories in our adult learning theory course. This is Vicki Creasy, and this is my final project for our summer 2013 adult learning theory course. I'll be discussing today what is the constructivist learning theory, what does research say are the pros and cons to the constructivist learning theory, who's responsible, and how can I best use this to teach adults. So let's get right to it. What is the constructivist learning theory? With the constructivist learning theory, students construct new knowledge for themselves through investigation, teacher-led inquiry, and discovery. Hands-on learning leads students to use prior knowledge and construct new knowledge on top of past experiences. This is the way that I learn best, and I feel like this is why I related most to this learning theory. I've always been a hands-on learner and a project-based hands-on teacher. All right, let's look at some of the main points to the constructivist learning theory. Learning is an active process in which the learner uses sensory input and constructs meaning out of it. People learn to learn as they learn. I like that. I think it sounds like a Dr. Seuss thing. Learning consists both of constructing meaning and constructing systems of meaning. So people are always learning, and as they're learning new things, they're also learning how to learn better. Learning is a social activity. Our learning is intimately associated with our connection with other human beings. Our teachers, our peers, our family, as well as casual acquaintances, including the people before us or next to us at an exhibit. One needs knowledge to learn. It's not possible to assimilate new knowledge without having some structure developed from previous knowledge to build on. And this is the main idea behind the constructivist learning theory. It's kind of like with a set of Legos. You can't just start with some Legos and start building up. You have to have a base plate to put on the bottom. You have to have something to build from, or else your knowledge will fall. Your Lego part will fall. So you have to have some knowledge in order to build from. And also, learning is contextual. We don't learn isolated facts and theories in some abstract, ethereal land of mind separate from the rest of our lives. We learn in relationship to what else we know, what we believe, our prejudices, and our fears. This is why in a classroom, everyone's learning is a unique and individual experience, because everyone has their own unique and individual experiences to build from and to draw from. They're going to get different ideas and different pieces of knowledge out of what a teacher is teaching. The points on this slide are attributed to G.E. Hine. You can see this information in the bibliography section attached to this presentation. All right, so now that we kind of know what is the constructivist learning theory, let's talk about who's responsible for it. And quite a few people are attributed with helping develop the constructivist learning theory. I'm going to talk about who I found were the top 3 who really influenced how the constructivist learning theory came to be. Now, the latest one, Jean Piaget, he actually died the soonest to us, and in 1980. He added 2 really important parts to the constructivist learning theory. He added the ages and stages, and this is ages and stages that he says that all human beings go through. And while they may have different time frames for them, all human beings go through these specific stages and ages in order. Now, some people may go a little quicker and some people may go a little slower, but they all go through each of these stages in this order. So the first stage is the sensory motor stage, and it is birth through ages 18 to 24 months. And then there's the pre-operational stage, and this is toddlerhood, which is about 18 to 24 months, through early childhood, age 7. That's right before students can really start reading well and doing math and ideas with math. And then we have concrete operational. This is ages 7 to 12. This is right before you start to learn algebra. Students aren't able yet until the end of this stage to use ideas to place in for, they aren't able to use abstract for an idea. So putting an X in for a number is not able to be done during this stage, but it can at the end of the stage. That's why algebra starts to be taught around age 12. And then you have formal operational, and this is adolescence through adulthood. And like I said earlier, he does believe that these stages are had by all in this order, but some people may go through them a little quicker and some people may go through them a little slower. Secondly, Piaget added the theory of development, which is that learners must construct their own knowledge. They build new knowledge through experience. So this is the basics of constructivist learning theory. he said that knowledge is built through experiences that allow the person to create what he called schemas. And schemas are like models of the world made in the mind. Schemas are made more thorough by two processes. Assimilation, which is taking in new information or experiences and incorporating them into our existing thoughts and ideas. And accommodation, which is changing one's existing schemas to include new information or experiences or to create new schemas. All right. The next influential person was John Dewey, and he's died the second furthest from us in 1952. And Dewey added in that he felt that knowledge comes only when the learner has an experience to draw from. So he was very specific in this. He felt that you do not learn new things unless you have an experience to draw from. He also said that students are social and work to construct new knowledge together in groups. And lastly, he said that students learn through directed activity and that teachers need to guide their students through directed activity so that they could best construct their own new knowledge. All right, and the last person we're going to look at is Lev Vygotsky. He actually died in 1934, so he died the earliest of the three people that we're studying, and he really added the social factor to the constructivist learning theory. He said that students learn socially and are influenced by social and cultural aspects. He added the discovery model of learning where the teacher is always active. So the teacher is active in guiding students to discover knowledge. The teacher is not a rote teacher, but a teacher who leads students into their own way of acquiring their own knowledge through discovery. And he added something that's extremely important, which is called the zone of proximal development. And this is what a learner can do with and without help. So it's a level at which a learner can actually learn by themselves without help, and then the level that of help that a learner needs in order to actually learn. And this is used quite extensively through all of the research that I did in the constructivist learning theory. All right, so let's look now at what research shows are some of the pros and cons to the constructivist learning theory. Since there's so many different learning theories out there, you're always going to find somebody who can tell you what's wrong with a learning theory and what's right with a learning theory. So we're going to look at research to tell us some of the challenges that are given to the constructivist learning theory. The first one is that research shows that teachers have to spend more time getting to know individual students on a personal level so that they can learn their zone of proximal development. If teachers are truly going to lead students to their greatest potential for learning and for acquiring new knowledge, they have to be able to direct their activities, and they need to know exactly what level of help that student needs. And that takes quite a bit of time to know. It's a lot easier to sit in a class with 30 students and just tell them their ABCs and not worry about where each one is individually. So it will take more time for teachers. Also, research shows that the constructivist learning theory works well on privileged children that have more experiences to draw from. So underprivileged children don't have as many experiences as privileged children do, and so that would lead the research to show that those children would not be able to construct as much knowledge because they just don't have the experiences to draw from. Also, when working in groups, some students can overpower less outgoing children. So some students are just going to be shy, and that's just their personality. And so when you have a really shy student and you try to get them to work in a group, they're not going to gain anything from working in that group, which is kind of defeats the idea of the constructivist learning theory. So you will have a child, or maybe 2 or 3, that's left behind and that doesn't actually isn't able to learn to the best of their ability. And then lastly, students do not develop basic skills. Because teachers are pushing students to discover new knowledge, you can't discover basic things like the multiplication times tables. Some basic skills have to be taught through rote learning, and some basic skills just have to be taught outright. And the constructivist learning theory doesn't support this. It feels that all learners need to be led to their own knowledge, and there's just some knowledge that learners can't get on their own. They have to be taught the basic skills. All right, but there are lots of positives, the research shows, with the constructivist learning theory. The first is that students gain knowledge that can be transferred to the next setting. So knowledge is never independent. You're learning something in one class that you can take into the next class. So you may learn today in geometry class about triangles, and then you're going to take that into the cafeteria whenever you're looking at the fractions of pizza at the table in front of you. All right, social and communication skills are honed and made important, leading to a student that can perform well in numerous studies and settings. So because students are working in groups and they are working together to construct new knowledge, they learn to speak well, they learn to tell their needs, tell their wants, they learn to express themselves well. This allows for students that are able to really perform well in different settings and in different arenas. Students learn to work well in teams and groups and can transfer those skills to the real world. Students are taught to actively question things and not take anything at face value, and this allows them to live in the critical world that we do. It allows them to realize that not everything is black and white, and that they need to actively seek out solutions to problems that they're faced with. And lastly, students have ownership over what they learn. Because they're constructing their own knowledge, they actually own what they learn, and this makes that knowledge more meaningful to them. All right, so let's look lastly at how we can use this to teach adults. So first, let's look at how adults learn. Adults learn to learn as they are learning. They are constantly learning. They're constantly learning how they learn best. That's why a course such as this, where you're learning about different ways to learn and different theories to learn, are so important. Learning is social. Adults learn together. Learning happens. It's an active process. Learning takes time. It is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. That's why statistics take so long to learn. Motivation is essential to learning, especially for adults. So it's very important to figure out what motivates students to learn. An adult needs knowledge and experiences to learn new knowledge and to build off of this. Learning takes place in context. Adults build new knowledge based on what they already know. And language is very important to learning. So you always want to use language that adults can relate to. All right, so let's look at how this relates to professional development sessions that you can lead when you're teaching adults. You always want to build from what teachers have already experienced. So if you're going to teach teachers about a new discipline method or a new way to control their classroom behaviorally, it's very important that you build off of experiences that they've already had. You draw from experiences that teachers have already had. This makes the learning very meaningful to them. You want to model using rubrics for assessment of learning outcomes, because rubrics are extremely important to the constructivist learning theory. If we expect our students to work in groups and work on projects, we need to assess them through rubrics. And the best way for teachers to learn to do this is by having it modeled for them. You want to use open-ended questions with teachers and adults, because this allows them to truly build the best amount of knowledge possible. It allows them to truly think and to come up with solutions to problems that are put in front of them. You also want to make the end goal relevant to teachers. Adults don't want to learn something that they don't know why they're learning and they don't feel will be important to them. So at the beginning of your professional development session, make sure that the teachers or the adults know why you're teaching them what you're teaching, and how they're going to be able to use this in their everyday lives. All right. You want to get teachers to take risks and to try something new that's out of their comfort zone. This is going to allow them, you're going to give them a safe setting with which to do this, and this is going to allow them to truly reach outside of themselves and to learn the most. And lastly, you want to have teachers work in teams to build knowledge together and lend expertise to each other. This helps them to draw from what works best for them, what doesn't work best for them. And it allows them to truly build off of each other and to learn the absolute most. All right, so we've covered quite a bit in this short amount of time. We've talked about the constructivist learning theory, what it is, who's responsible for it, some pros and cons that research sees to the constructivist learning theory, and how you can use it to teach adults. I hope that this session was informative and that you found it useful. Have a wonderful day.
So it's kind of a longer video, but it really gives you a good aspect of what constructivist education is. At this time, I like to be a little sneaky and to make sure everyone listens to all of my lectures and just doesn't just skip through them. So at this time, please open up your email and send me an email to my email address, ljr1@msstate.edu, and just say the word Mississippi. That's all you got to say. Subject, Mississippi, and then put the word Mississippi in there. And that's just going to be a check to make sure everyone, of course, is listening to my lectures. So let's continue on. I like to be sneaky sometimes. The effective use of technology, this paragraph right here says, we already know this because we kind of went over this before in class, but the effective use of technology in the teaching process might quickly have a positive impact on the school's learning environment. That's going to help one of those dimensions. However, it also says that veteran teachers have issues with, they're worried about their skills with technology, but they overcome that, you'll see later on, through talking to new teachers. One part right here says that the teachers who communicate effectively with their students understand them better. And that's something that, being able to talk to someone and understand a student, or understand a parent whenever you have a parent-teacher conference, is also important. This next video is from a comedy show, but it talks about it. It's just a funny parent-teacher conference. And you'll see, even though it's a funny one and it's just a joke and everything else, you'll see how the teachers are always positive and she talks to the parents. And that's the whole point of this, is are you able to speak to someone very well? So let's just break up the monotony of the lecture and just bring in a comedy piece real quick so we can kind of have a little laugh.